Hello, everyone. Welcome for making the time in the afternoon. We know everyone is zoomed out by this time of day, but we would hope that this is going to be entertaining as well as helpful. This is our June 9th session in this summer long series in ReframeWork, where I'm Anna Tavis, Academic Director of Human Capital Management Programs at NYU. And these are my co-presenters and collaborators tonight. Stella Lupushaw of ReframeWork is also a faculty member at NYU. And Mike Zarilli is joining us from Texas. Mike is a graduating student in Human Capital Analytics and Technology. And the three of us are currently collaborating on the second part of our research on employee experience, which we're going to share with you. At the same time, use these tools to show you how you can do a lot of things with online brainstorming, and as well as push your research out there through these fairly entertaining tools. So on this note, I want to pass the baton to Stella Lupushaw. And Stella, maybe you could also say a few words about yourself, and then we will keep going.
Sounds good. So my name is Stella Lupushaw. As Anna mentioned, I am delighted to be part of the NYU faculty. I teach the digital workplace design. And really at the core of that class is to think how HR can bring more technology and human-centered design thinking to the workplace. And one thing that was very obvious in the class is there's so much we could do remotely, and that was the BC timeframe, right, before crisis, before COVID. And now, as we were forced, all or majority of us, to work remotely, I think it's becoming even more critical to rely on these tools and technologies, as well as build some new skill sets. So that's what we'll primarily do today. We'll go through some basics of virtual and remote tools, and then we will do a series of practical exercises where we'll not only learn about the employment values and how we can create a better employee experience, but also how we can facilitate engaging and fun conversations with the organization or members of our teams. So first of all of these sessions are conversationals, are for us to work with each other and discuss. So please turn on your mics and please share a little bit more if in your day-to-day experience you're using any virtual tools, any brainstorming tools, and if so, what do you use them for? And if you don't, that's okay too. In your mind, what would be the most effective use of these tools?
You can also use your chat if you don't want to turn on your mics. So are there any virtual brainstorming tools that you use? Okay, we're seeing from our Lisa, Microsoft Teams.
Excellent.
And she's using Mural as well. Okay.
Google Docs.
This is going to be an observer. Google Docs.
Slack. Excellent.
Yep. Teams. Yep.
Asana.
These are all collaboration tools, right?
Yeah. So a lot of it will be dependent on the infrastructure and the choices your organization has provided. And when you think about the brainstorming tools, the critical components or the features that you need to look for is the ability to enable people to do individual brainstorming, right? So when you have a conference call, while it's a little easier to democratize the airtime, I think providing people with either asynchronous or in parallel the ability to brainstorm, like similarly to what you do in the chat, I think it's critical. The other part, of course, brainstorming is all about ideas capturing, and it's more about the quantity than the quality. So providing that ability to collect data very quickly, it's a critical and important feature. Another feature that typically you would look into when you do brainstorming, when you select brainstorming tools, is the ability to group a cluster. Since you go for the quantity, you have to have the ability to group things so you can make sense and create some sort of a system and get to coherent conclusions. And then lastly is voting, the ability to vote. Since that provides another layer on prioritizing the ideas that were identified or brainstormed, or solutions that will be prioritized. Okay, when you think about the key decision criteria you make when selecting tools, it has to be really easy to use with minimal setup. So for example, today we intentionally chose Mural just because it's much easier to provide access to people without necessarily asking them to generate a user ID. So enter anonymously. On the flip side, you'll get to be displayed on the screen with a funny name, such as, funny squirrel or something like that. But that's okay. I think that also provides anonymity in case people may not necessarily feel comfortable to share some of the ideas. So that increases the transparency of the brainstorming. Of course, it has to be easy to invite, it has to be engaging and fun. So that part is the tooling, but part is also the facilitation skills. And then obviously you collect a lot of the data, and the last thing you want to do is get stuck with the data and have to copy and paste each post-it. So having the ability to export results, it's also critical. This way you will be able to synthesize and make sense of the output later on for whatever purposes you're using it. And then it has to really fit within the meeting construct that you're designing. So thinking of how you structure the conversation and what type of questions you're asking, it may not necessarily translate one-to-one to what you would do in a person. So adapting to the virtual ways of conversing is important. So that means, not allowing too many empty and big pauses, or providing the ability for people to not feel overwhelmed. Sometimes you may ask for a lot of things to look at and comment on. So chunking the information and saying, well, success for this brainstorming will be that each one of you will post 4 post-its or something along the line that makes it more digestible and easy for people to navigate. And more importantly, inclusive design and accessibility. A lot of people are now benefiting from these virtual brainstorming tools because many times some people may not be able to access the physical work environment. Some people may have difficulties hearing, and therefore in a conference room may have a difficult time participating. And in fact, there was one interesting comment about older people being able to participate on boards, even though they have significant experience, just because being on a board in a physical room with limited hearing abilities limits their contributions, as opposed to on a virtual in a virtual environment, you now can turn on the captions, or you can really maximize or turn on the sound on your computer, which makes it a lot better and provides people with certain limitations to be able to participate and access the content. Any questions so far? Anything that you would add to this list from your wish list? Okay, so let's dive into the categories of brainstorming tools. There are, and you could see this really in the comments that you've posted, there are different types of tools, and they can be roughly placed in 5 categories. So it's documents editors, so that's where Google Docs will be, a lot of the Microsoft Office tools. Dropbox has a good collaborative environment. Sticky notes application. So this is really where you just draw post-its and try to resemble to the degree possible the virtual flip charts. Ways to collaborate on projects and run meetings, and that's the retrospective and design meeting tools. Dedicated group brainstorming that enable you to make decisions or facilitate decision-making conversations. And then the one that we're going to focus on and use today is virtual design spaces. So this is really created for those who do design thinking exercises and workshops and run brainstorming virtually to create visual outputs. Specifically, we're going to use Mural. Any other tools that you've seen in your experience? And I think Slack is not listed here, but I think it's a good one to add. That's more about collaborative and conversation and messaging than the brainstorming, but it's definitely a good brainstorming tool. And Anna, we used Slack as a brainstorming tool for the recent jam, right? Do you want to describe a little bit how we did that?
Exactly. I mean, we use Slack. By the way, I just learned that Slack is partnering with Amazon or to create a very all-inclusive kind of collaborative environment. We'll see what kind of product is going to come out of there. But we used it at NYU. We invited all faculty to collaborate on, various topics, created channels, and it was a very, very dynamic environment within a certain period of time where all faculty were invited to come in with their ideas about improving teaching, solving for various pedagogical issues, as well as the future of higher ed, et cetera. So it was very energizing for all, and the ability to see other people contribute at the same time, respond, just like in the jazz band. It was really palpable. It was a very, not only intellectual experience, but also very inclusive, very kind of the visceral experience of being in contact with so many people at the same time, which, by the way, is very rarely achieved in the face-to-face environments, where we've been able to accommodate about 250 people at the same time.
And the beauty of that, it was also asynchronous, and it allowed people to dial in whenever they had the break in schedule or they had the capacity to come and contribute. And the beautiful part of that type of brainstorming and collaboration is it's not only the organizers that get benefit out of it, but the participants also get a lot out of it by just reading everybody else's comments and ideas and learning something new that they didn't think of before. So that's another principle to keep in mind when designing the experiences.
Right. So in summary, much as we lament the fact that we are only limited to the online environments, there are lots of benefits, and that's what we want to highlight. Obviously, there are pros and cons to both modalities, but in this session, we're going to explore the benefits of being online with all of those advantages that we are highlighting.
So let's start. We're going to learn by doing first. So we are going to log into Mural, and I'm pasting in the chat the link to the Mural board. So please click on it, and you should be able to see what I have on my screen. So you will see a board that has 4 areas. One is where in the world. The other one is age and gender. Third one is occupation. And the last one is superpowers. And let me show you a few details on how to use it. On the left bar, and you'll see several options. You'll click on these little post-its, and you'll be able to drag and drop post-its onto the board, whatever you find appropriate. Another area, look at the icons, and these are also something that you just drag and drop to the board. And as far as navigating, you can scroll to the left, to the right. If you have a difficult time with scrolling with the track bar, you can use these buttons on the left or right to either bring it closer, zoom in or zoom out. Another thing to note, you have, if you click on a post-it or you double click anywhere, a post-it will appear. If you want to see it bigger, you click on this local menu zoom, so you'll now be able to see really easily, and then type in it. And you can easily delete and move things around. So action for all of you. You are invited to place either a little icon or a little post-it in the location where you're based out of. So for example, I am in New Jersey, and I have hopefully somewhere in the accurate place that mark. Then once you're done with that, choose either a checkbox or whatever icon you prefer, and indicate your gender and your age range. Once you're done, indicate your occupation, and feel free to add a post-it with anything new that you may want to add. And most importantly, indicate your superpower. What skills do you do to bring to your teams? Any questions? Anything that you're running into difficulties with?
Yeah. Maybe you can explain what the purpose of this is. You're kind of positioning yourself, graphically identifying yourself.
That's correct. That's number one. Number two, think of it as a as a replacement for survey, right? You can get some of the demographic information from people on an anonymous fashion just by asking them to, in a fun way, fill in as well as learn how to use the tool.
Okay, so Nina is asking how she can select an icon.
So Nina, you click on the little star on the left menu, and you can either click on it or drag one. So it will be a little small, so you may want to just maximize it and then you'll see it. And an alternative option is to tell me where you want me to place the cursor or the checkbox on the board. And this provides to those who may not be able to see it easily an alternative channel. And likewise with voice and with chat, you can comment. So there is a message. They're very small and hard to see. That's why you zoom in. Okay, so we'll spend 2 more minutes here.
So Stella, how many people could be participating at the same time?
Unlimited.
Well, will it get very crowded if all of them are in New York area?
It will, but if you zoom it out, zoom it in, you'll be able to see. Let me clean up a little bit of the. Elisa's in New York. We have Southern New Jersey. We have Virginia. We have Clayton, North Carolina. Excellent. Do we have any global participants?
No, not on that one.
Not on this one. Excellent. All right. And you see the names, right? Anonymous Lobster, Panda. So it's a fun way for the tool to also engage and give you some name and identity without necessarily revealing. So I'll leave this open. Can you please add me to New York? Absolutely, Marcia. Okay, this looks like it's an empty circle post-it. Marcia, New York. Okay. Anyone else? So let's go back to the discussion so we can debrief on the exercise. So questions, what have you learned while playing with it? And what is one aha moment that you had as you were practicing it?
Stella, one question from Meredith here. Where did the map come from? Is it there? Does it come with the map, or you can create it? And that's kind of your idea of how you want to start the session.
So what's beautiful about Mural, it has a lot of templates that you can use. And the map was something that was already in the sort of app store of the Mural. Many of these type of design tools have already built an ecosystem. So as people use it and create some new templates, they make it available for others to reuse and repurpose. And you yourself can make it into a template as well. So for example, this one, oh man, with Zoom, I cannot. If I, for example, create a board, it gives me the option to select different templates that are already in existence or create something from scratch. And it has different categories. It can be brainstorming, it can be empathizing. So templates such as, for persona development, retrospective, ways to brainstorm or manage remote teams. And then it creates a copy of the board that I can then repurpose for my needs and adapt and edit. Harder to manipulate than you'd have liked, Zane. Yes, I agree. There are some limitations with Mural, and Miro, M-I-R-O, I found that to be a lot easier to navigate and use. However, Miro requires everyone to create an ID, so that creates an extra barrier for users to log in. Okay.
The one thing I'll add to that, Stella, Zaina, I definitely agree. And we used Mural for Stella's class for digital workplace design. And the first few times I used it, it was definitely difficult to manipulate. And then as you're in it pretty often, it gets more intuitive. So I think it's like a lot of tools that the more you use it, the more intuitive it gets.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you acquire access to Mural? If you have an educational email, you get access for free. I think Mural is very, and many of the design tools are very welcoming the students and the educational professionals, and they provide educational license. Many of these tools do. And if you want to, if you create a board from scratch, for example, you can create it into a template. So you publish it as a template, and then you can reuse it over and over again. Okay. Any other comments, any other questions or ahas from playing with Mural so far? Nope. All right. I think we're ready to move into the next segment. So Anna, let's switch now to the workplace experience concepts.
Okay. So what we wanted to do is to give you another example of how to use this for a slightly different purpose. For the purpose of a research, for example, a quick research study or sort of a survey, pulse taking in the class or in a work situation. And for that, we wanted to use the research that we've done, Stella, myself, and two of our colleagues. We published this workplace experience, a research paper in early April. The study where we ran the survey, there were over 300 respondents with the purpose of really identify what that ideal workplace experience is and what actually matters. So it's, by the way, it's downloadable for free at www.workplaceexperience.com. So you're welcome to go in and see what we found. You know, already then, before COVID, obviously, workplace experience or employee experience was front and center for a lot of organizations. In the higher ed setting, we talk about student experience, flipped classrooms, and sort of the priorities, the flattering of the organizations, and the focus on employees. So what does it take? The intention here was to identify what it takes to create the ideal employee or student experience, and make some recommendations for the workplace. So the next one, what we want to show you as we came up, we came up with this employment values pyramid. You know, all of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that's sort of the basics. Now it's becoming more and more sophisticated and more nuanced around the priorities and interests of employees. And so we came up with these levels and individual icons you see identifying various aspects of employee experience that in different combinations represent personalization of experience in the workplace. And all of this would not have been possible without obviously technology, digital technology, and ability to scale. So these are the kinds of things that are changing the way HR is being delivered. What we want to do now, and I will pass it over to Stella, is to really try and test with you of how we would go out there now, given that from the end of March, when we published our study, to now, there has been a lot of changes given the pandemic we're living through. And what we're seeing is that employee experience or student experience has changed. The priorities have changed. And what we want to do now, we just started, the three of us started the next study to understand how those priorities changed and what is important to people now. And we want you to help us with that. So Stella, do you want to take it from here?
Yep. So let me just set some of the basics of the pyramid. So when we get into the exercise and Mike walks you through the flow of what we're going to do, it makes it easier to understand what we're asking you to do. So if you think about the employment values, it's really at the core intended to describe the set of expectations and set of interests that employees have from the organization. Not everybody comes to work for the same things, right? Not everybody comes for salary only. Yes, we all expect fair compensation, but other things make our stickiness or loyalty, defines our loyalty to the organization, depending on the life stage we're at, depending on the context in which we live, the norms we grew up with. And you can think of all of these as a collection of things that many people may or may not have, but the organization, from an organizational perspective as an HR leader, I think it provides us with a broader range of things and offerings we can offer to the employees or emphasize in our proposition, as well as communicate better about. So if you think about the actual clusters of values, fundamentals are expected to be provided by everyone, right? So you have to have a fair remuneration. You have to have an organization that complies with legal and the laws. You have to have an ethical organization, transparency to the degree you can, safe environment, accessible environment. A lot of that is required by law. And even the employment value promise, right? If you have an employee that reads all the marketing materials and on the recruitment website, and then when they come in through the door, they see a very different environment, obviously that will create dissonance and will start making that negative impact on the experience that potentially may result in lower productivity or disengagement or even attrition. Then you move into the economic cluster. So this is where you give people the ability to make money or maybe save on costs, on benefits, on get insurance so they can reduce their risks. The ability to build relationships and belong to a community, to create connections at work, because that also means a lot to a lot of people. Then the next layer, it's important, and I think from especially now remote and distributed ways of working, ease of working matters. I think we moved really quickly to online without changing the processes. So we just probably converted typical processes to be digital without necessarily rethinking our tooling, enabling us to perform those processes effectively. Are we adding more complexity? So what happened to the customer experience and what made a lot of companies that are using those human-centered design thinking principles successful is time to bring those type of thinking to the world of HR and to workers and ourselves. So this means looking at the end-to-end journey and experience of the employees and saying, are they running into hassles? Do they have to log into 13 systems and then forget the passwords and then have to reset and then start over? And then by the time you're ready to be productive and do something, it's already lunchtime. Do you provide them the ability to feel they have autonomy and control over their activities and they have the flexibility they need? Do they have the ability to see the organization innovating and investing in some of these digital technologies, since suddenly we all became part of the digital revolution overnight? And then as you get higher up the hierarchy, it's about career and ability to create a network and create a reputation. It is about building the sense of belonging and have pride in the products and the brand that you work for. It's being part of leaving a legacy either for yourself or for the organization, all the way to social impact, social responsibility, and vision and self-transcendence. And the question we want to discuss in the remaining time is, what is the responsibility of the company? Should everything and anything be provided by the company, or are there things more important than others? So before I pass it on to Mike, any questions about the pyramid, about the groupings, about the employment values concept? Let me look at the chat.
So I have a question. My name is Roshni, and I'm also one of the current students in the HR program. So for the research that you've done, so which organizations, Like, who were your participants? Like, what type of organizations?
So we had two types of data sources. One, we run a survey where we had over 300 HR practitioners. So these were the heads of HR or the senior leaders in different business units. And a good part of it was based in the US, although we had good participation from Europe and Latin America. And then we run over 20 interviews with organizations that are known or have implemented employee experience changes. So the companies are for Fortune 500 big brands, where we knew somebody who either led an initiative or were part of an initiative in their company that transformed the employee experience. So
Yeah,
we try to have both.
yeah. One thing I want to say that, you're welcome to download that report. It really breaks down the methodology and all the principles here. So it's very well explained. And the purpose today is more, to give you the experience of the tool as well as these types of concepts, but mostly focused on, the new way of combining this type of research project with a tool that will help you get to those data in a different way. Right, Stella?
Exactly. Okay. So
I have,
go on.
oh, sorry. Yes, I just have a comment or question also. Where do you think employee wellness fall under this this pyramid, like work-life balance? Some companies do yoga programs, but now we're moving into virtual also. So that's something that needs to be considered also.
I agree. And some of it is under the emotional and mental health. And it's interesting to see how companies are now adopting that wellness offering. So one organization that I've had recent conversation with are starting to offer delivery services. So they're paying for Instacart and Peapod subscriptions as part of their benefits package, because people cannot necessarily, or they're not feel safe to go to, or have no time just because their workload has increased dramatically.
Although, another, again, it's a little bit of a different conversation, but we may argue that wellness and health has moved all the way down to fundamentals.
Yes.
At the time of the pandemic. It's not just nice to have, and it's not, but it really is dealing with very basic human needs of safety and health. That's how the situation we're in is kind of reshuffling a lot of the hierarchies that we've built around those types of priorities.
Thank you.
Great question. Okay, so Michael, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks. So what we'd love to do now is get your input on what are the employee values that are most critical, which are ones that aren't necessarily a need to have. So we'd love to do is use Mural as a group brainstorming tool, jump back into it and divide out into 3 groups, and we'll cover different levels of that pyramid that we just talked about. And we want to break down all the values, there are about 40 or so of them, into if they're need to haves, nice to haves, or if they're not that critical for the organization to provide. So we'll have some discussion in groups. Stella's going to put us into breakout groups. And then after that, we'll come back and kind of debrief as a full group on what some of the key takeaways were.
So any questions? So wait until I post the link to the second board that we're going to use in the chat. And then as you get assigned to breakout rooms, please remember the group you are assigned to. This way you'll be able to quickly navigate in the board where we're going. All right.
So great question, Jessica. We want to get the input of the group. So we're planning on having conversation about back and forth about what you think from an employee perspective within your organization is most critical, and what's a need to have, what's a nice to have, and what's not as critical. Does that make sense?
So before we break out, and we'll probably go for about 10 minutes, this is what the board looks like. You will see a grouping with Post-its that you can move around. And the activity is for you as a team to discuss where each of these Post-its belong, in which column. Does it belong into need to have, so there's something that the company should provide, something that is nice to have, that it's a discretion to provide, something that it's not expected the company to provide. And if you feel we've missed some values, please add them to the new values.
Do we have everyone back, Stella?
It looks like people are coming back. All right. So how was that?
Time flew.
I know. When you're having fun.
We were in the middle of a discussion about what companies will have to offer for people working from home, assuming that working from home would be a normal practice for a while, to a point where we were discussing, okay, ergonomic chairs, internet connection, and this and that. Quite interesting. The other day, I actually found out that there's a small company that actually ships everything, the desk, the computers, the screens for one to set their home office, I mean, professionally. And it's a service they offer to large corporations. I never imagined that anyone would offer such that type of service. So quite interesting how things are evolving fast.
Well, you know, it's been my experience that it evolved, right? I think when I started many years ago with a company, everything was shipped. And then at about the 10-year point, let's say maybe at about 2005, 2008, that actually changed. And suddenly we were paying for our own Wi-Fi, and it was all the way down to get your own laptop and get back to us. So there was an evolution. I think it started that way, and it worked away from it. It was bring your own technology, BYOT. So
cost reduction. Eventually, it's going to go there.
yeah, yeah.
So as far as the values and the way of thinking about them, did you find anything surprising? Did you find anything you're really conflicted? And more importantly, how did you decide which column to put the values in?
Elisa, speak up.
Yeah, Elisa, yes.
Hi, Stella. I was just going to say that I think what surprised me most is where people were coming from in terms of their own personal values. So sometimes I'm surprised that they said, okay, they think this is really, really important. Whereas I'm like, no, I don't think that's important. I think that's like barely critical. So to hear about your workplace experience, but then how that relates back to you personally. So I don't know what everybody else does on the call, but some of us are students in human resources. But if you're in finance, for example, your cost and all these things are going to be fundamental by, the nature of the work that you do. So I enjoyed the conversation that went back and forth that in my group.
And it's tough to choose because at the end of the day, everything has a cost. And obviously you cannot satisfy everything. So it's all about prioritization and choosing the right messages and say, we want to be as a company known for being the best at, I don't know, ease of working, and then building in the principle into everything that you choose to deploy or implement. So what do you,
I think that we're just at a weird kind of collision place because on one hand, we've learned what we can do without. So we may have a more practical mindset about it, right?
Yeah.
Office, we had 3 monitors, or we had a never-ending supply of coffee, or we had personal connections of chit chat and ways to collaborate spontaneously. But we have learned through a tough time that we can do without those things and still get by and find new ways of interacting with each other or making efforts or finding out that maybe it wasn't as important as you even thought it was, or that new things have become more important. So I think that, yes, as we're all starting to work from home more, we are realizing, oh, I wish I had a more practical setup in my home. I wish I did have this or that. And thinking long-term, I would like to have those things, but also I can't even get certain things at the grocery store, so who am I to be asking for more when I know that I can survive on the minimums, because that's what I've been asked to do these past few months.
Sounds like there are a lot of agreements.
It's difficult for things right now.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you think of the tool and this way of brainstorming and simulating the conversation? Was it effective? Did you feel was enabling you to contribute and still have that experience of brainstorming as a team?
No, I think so. I think it was actually, once I've tried this a couple times, second time's a lot easier. Once you get comfortable with it, I think it works really well. And kudos to our facilitator, who did a really good job. Hopefully got an A in the course. She deserves it, obviously. So, but, you know, we just kind of give and take. And usually when you have remote people and we've never met each other before, right, it's kind of hard to interact, but it was a certain level of comfort that I was surprised by. So thank you, Mike.
Yes, he did get an A.
And how to evaluate them. So, you know.
And then the
Any
other
other
important,
list to look into for a company, because we are struggling with the collaboration piece. We're a data company, consumer data company. And so our tech team, more specifically, is having a hard time with doing whiteboarding. So Miro had been recommended. I'd never seen Mural before.
I've been using both. So my preferred one is Miro. I think it's much easier to navigate. But again, if you want to do a mass brainstorming, Mural probably it's more productive and effective.
Can I ask how long it took you to set that up to get the stickies ready for us to take a look at?
A couple of hours.
Okay.
It's mostly thinking about the design of the experience itself. I'm trying to create a story out of the whole hour. But yeah, it wasn't too bad. So last question, do you see this type of tools being an effective replacement for some of the survey and data gathering and building this empathy and understanding of the employees in the workplace?
Well, I was actually viewing it in terms of tomorrow. I have to teach a class on the impact of environmental, social, demographic, environmental factors in company situations and strategy and planning. And I think that this would really help the students decide. I could, you know, I can't do it in overnight, but I really wish I would have it, you know, to do that, because I think what it adds is the visual impact to the breakout room. And actually focuses people on here's the assignment and here's how to move forward.
You know, it's also kind of the muscle memory. The more you do it, the more intuitive it becomes and really quick. And if you go to their website, they have a whole variety of different options, and it's pretty comprehensive, I would say, for all types of brainstorming. This is just a very, very small, you know, a taste of the tool for you, rather than the whole experience that you could develop.